Hello everybody, welcome to George Klein Photography. Neutral density filters. If you've ever done long exposure photography, you will know that they're one of those bits of kit you just kind of have to have if you want to take advantage of what they can do for you. There are some software tricks that can emulate the results, but they're just not very good and they take a huge amount of computing power to do well, and particularly if you want to do them with raw files. So, ND filters. The trouble with them is they're quite expensive. The good ones at least can cost hundreds of dollars from brands like Lee, Polar Pro or Breakthrough. And that's a lot of money for what is essentially sunglasses for your camera. For those of you who don't know, a neutral density filter is just a darkened piece of glass that you put in front of the lens and it limits how much light. It's measured in stops. This is a 10 stop one, which means it cuts out 10 stops of light or 99.9% of the light entering the lens, which is an awful lot, and you can get some really cool effects with this for long exposures, taking half a second to several minutes and that sort of thing. But they're expensive. So when I was looking for one a few months ago before a trip to New Zealand, where there is a lot of water and stuff you can take advantage of with a neutral density filter, I stumbled across a brand called Gobe. They are a fairly new one. They've been around since I think about 2014, and they make ND filters, quite a large range of them as it happens. They're also quite an interesting company in terms of their environmental consciousness. If you register the filter when you get it, they will plant, I think, 5 trees to sort of give a bit back to the environment, so that's nice. And they are cheap. This filter, which is a 72mm filter thread, only costs $40 US or about $60 Australian, I think, on their website. And for that, it's surprisingly good. The build quality is quite nice. It's made of aluminium. The filter thread fits on and off quite well. It's nice and smooth. I haven't had any issues with that. And it comes in quite a nice protective padded metal case, tin that you can keep it in. So, all looking good. And I have used this filter for a few months. I've done some field testing of it in New Zealand, so from real world experience I can say the image quality is good. In terms of image quality, there are really 2 things you look for with ND filters, and this is where your money is usually going, and that is sharpness and color cast. And color cast is pretty obvious. You're putting a darkened, colored bit of glass in front of your sensor. There's a good chance it's going to introduce color cast. And this is not just with cheap filters. Lee filters, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, are known to have a slight blue color cast. It's easily correctable in post. It's not really a problem, but it is there. And generally speaking, the cheaper you go on ND filters, the worse the color cast is going to get, and the really expensive ones are actually color neutral. The other one is sharpness. Again, you put a piece of glass in front of the lens. If it's not as good quality as the lens, it can negatively impact sharpness. Now, these Gobe filters are supposed to be made of Japanese glass. There's no brand name associated with that Japanese glass. It's not shot glass, for example. But, it's claimed to be quite good quality glass. And from field experience, I can attest that it doesn't seem to introduce a color cast. I didn't notice any sharpness issues in New Zealand. But for this test, for this review, I want to be a bit more scientific about it. So I did some more in-depth and controlled testing, which we'll have a look at now. Okay, so here we have 2 images, shot one after the other in midday sun, so nice consistent lighting. The settings for this were f8, ISO 200, which is the base ISO for the Fuji X-T2. The white balance is locked at 5500 Kelvin and the focus is manually set. The only variable between these is the addition of the ND filter for one and the corresponding change in shutter speed to bring the exposure back up. The shutter speeds used were 1/2000th and 1/2 second, which are 10 stops apart. I'm just using a Rode video mic box because it's a convenient sample of type on a white background, which is a simple but quite demanding test for this sort of thing. You can see that one image is slightly brighter than the other, and that becomes more obvious when we crop into 100% and put them side by side. Apart from the very slight exposure difference, everything is looking very favourable. The sharpness of both images is pretty much identical to my eye. I can't see any obvious colour cast. This is really good. If you want to pause the video and make a guess which is which, maybe put it in the comments. Okay, place your bets, and there. The picture on the right that's slightly brighter actually has the ND filter. If it makes you feel any better, I had to check multiple times which was which when making this video. I also tried one more test. I took the shot with the filter into Adobe Camera Raw just to see how much I had to bring the exposure down to make it match the one without the filter. And I swear, hand on heart, there are two images on screen right now. Dropping the exposure by just 0.22 of a stop, and the images are basically identical. Less than a third of a stop is essentially irrelevant in real world terms. You would never notice that if you weren't looking at these side by side. Additionally, the fact that changing exposure is all that was needed to make these images effectively identical means that any color cast is basically imperceptible and therefore irrelevant. Okay, wow. That's pretty impressive, really. As I said, I used this in the field, I knew it was good, but I didn't realize that it was that good. I was expecting to make a load of apologies about this filter and say that it was good for the price. But after doing those tests, it's just good. Like, there's really no sharpness loss and there's no color cast, which is very, very impressive, particularly at this price point, but it's just impressive full stop for a filter. Now, there is one image quality thing that you need to be aware of, which is vignettes. If you're using this on a wide angle lens, you are going to see quite a serious vignette at the edges and the corners. On my Fuji 10-24 lens at the wide end, there is a big, big vignette. However, that is kind of unavoidable with these sorts of filters. And I think this is best to explain why with a little animation. Here we have a side-on cutaway view of a filter on a lens. There is light coming in perpendicular to the filter and light coming in at an angle. If we draw a line along the path that the light takes through the glass, where we see that the light coming at an angle is having to pass through substantially more glass. So, as you can see, unless you make a filter specially designed for wide angle lenses, you're kind of just gonna have a vignette at the wide end. It is removable in post. As extreme as that vignette is, Lightroom or Camera Raw, you can remove that and bring back all that detail. Some of the more expensive ones I think have slightly less vignette, but you're kind of just gonna have a vignette at wide angles with these things, so that's not really a negative of this, it's just a fact of physics, really. So, where does that leave us? Well, this is a really, really good buy, particularly for the price, but just in general, this is a good ND filter. And even if you have a really good ND filter, I'd honestly recommend this as a backup to just keep in your bag in case it gets broken or lost or something, because it's that good. And I'm not sure why Gobe aren't charging more for this. They definitely could, because it is up there with a lot of better brands. I'm able to compare this directly to them because I don't own other brands. If you want to see a sort of broad test of a lot of ND filters, Matt Granger did a really good one where I think he compared 10 neutral density filters. I'll link it below. He didn't compare the Gobe in that, but looking at his results and looking at my own tests and my own experience, I'd honestly say this is up there with some of the more expensive ones in his test and in general. So really take a serious look at Gobe for any purpose. Now, there are a couple of caveats to that, which are, first of all, sample variation is a thing. I might just have a particularly good Gobe filter and others might be less good. That's a risk you run with any brand, but obviously cheaper ones, quality control is one of the first things that goes with a cheaper product. However, I have no evidence that that is the case, and if they're all this good, all the more power to Gobe, because it's fantastic. The other thing to bear in mind is I am testing this on a 24 megapixel Fuji X-T2 camera. If you put this on a higher res camera, you may see more issues. If you've got a Nikon D850 or a Sony A7R Mark IV with 40 or 60 megapixels, obviously that is going to be more demanding of your optics to get the best out of that. But I would say, why are you putting a $40 filter on a $4,000 camera in that case? So again, that isn't really something you can expect from a filter like this. I'm not saying it can't do it, maybe it can. But from my testing, it's at 24 megapixels, so bear that in mind. But overall, I am so impressed with this thing. For the price and just in general is a fantastic filter, and honestly just go and buy one, because long exposure photography is one of those things that can really elevate your photography to a whole other level in terms of look, and you can achieve things that you just can't do any other way, and you need an ND filter for that, and this one is fantastic. One thing I would note is Gobe do actually make different levels of ND filter, which are measured in peaks, as in mountain peaks. They've got 1, 2, and 3 peak filters with corresponding increases in quality. The 3 peak ones seem to only be their high-end variable NDs, but this is a 2 peak neutral density filter, so it is the slightly better one. Whether that actually relates to a significant increase in image quality, I don't know. But I've tested the 2 peak one, so that is what this review relates to. But yeah, check this company out because they are fantastic, and if this is a good representation of the kind of quality you can expect from them, then they are going far with this because they are really, really good. Anyway, like and subscribe for more videos. Thanks for watching.